So let's talk about Joe Biden. This guy, we didn't pull that tweet that I saw. I tried to stay off of Twitter over the vacation. My whole plan was to go to like this like resorty place where they have programs for the kids, and I could put the kids in at like 9 in the afternoon in the morning, and they're like, see you guys at like 3:30 or 4. Dad's gonna read a book, and that didn't work.
You didn't get any reading done?
I'd never had more than 4 minutes, contiguous minutes of like solitude and over the course of like 16 hours a day. It was the most exhausting thing. We had a great time. I love being with my kids, and that was fun, but it was exhausting. So all I could do was like, just like to escape was to look at political Twitter. That was, yeah, I need another vacation. But so I see this from, and this was, I guess this was like, maybe this was just a couple of days ago. Maybe it was Friday.
Yeah.
And I guess it was at night, so we were maybe traveling at this point. And Jen Psaki, who is a mom, and she's a vice president at the Carnegie Endowment. She's a CNN contributor. She's at We Advisors. I'm just looking at her. And National Security Action, former White House comms chief, former State Department spokesperson. And this is the tweet that she had. Now, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's a lot of issues that Joe Biden has around women. You know, the touchy thing and getting into people's personal space. I think that's indicative of a guy who doesn't feel like he has any boundaries, who is really very cocksure of himself. And that is something that is, it helps to be a white guy who's been in the Senate for 40 years or whatever it is, to have that sense like, hey, there's no one's personal space. I don't even have to contemplate the idea of personal space. And of course, you don't think that. Being a white guy who's been in the Senate for 40 years is, they say like he's never having to say sorry. It's never having to think about other people, right? So it becomes super easy for you to say, oh, I'm going to have my people float that Stacey Abrams is going to be my VP candidate because that's going to help me. That's going to help shore up the problems I have with women and with maybe, and particularly African-American women because of the whole Anita Hill thing. We'll talk about that in a minute. Now, if you're a person who has respect for other people and you contemplate, hey, maybe she doesn't want to be exploited in that way, you should reach out to her and say like, hey, I'm contemplating. Do you mind if,
Yeah. Maybe we should try it.
Well, and then we found out later that, no, he never had that conversation. She was rather upset about it. I think it was pretty clear from her public pronouncements. She didn't say Joe Biden's an a-hole, but she basically said, that was the subtext, in my opinion. Anyways, so Joe Biden has these problems with women. That's it. Anita Hill, just what he did with Stacey Abrams. He did the same thing with Elizabeth Warren, actually, 4 years ago, 2016. And he knew, again, that was like, I have a problem with women. That's Joe Biden saying, I have a problem with women. I have a problem with my relationship to the banks. And that's why he chose Elizabeth Warren to float that year. Because that gives you the idea of like, wait a second, if he's open to Elizabeth Warren, maybe he's not the guy that I think he is. So Jen Psaki, I don't know if she is a surrogate for him. I don't know if she's going to be working in his comms. I don't know. I mean, in some circles, apparently this type of thing is like a huge scandal if they haven't announced that they're working and they're actually doing this. But I'm not one of those people who thinks that's a huge scandal. But here she is writing, Elizabeth Warren would be a beloved Harvard law professor, not a presidential candidate, if Barack Obama and Joe Biden had not worked with her to make her idea to form a Consumer Financial Protection Bureau law. Now, first off, she's wrong because Elizabeth Warren was chosen by Harry Reid to sit on a special committee to deal with TARP when the financial crisis started. And I don't know if it was called TARP at the time, but to sit on a committee to look at the financial crisis well before Barack Obama was president. Secondly, I want to see the documents from that White House. If Joe Biden is going to claim any credit for putting for choosing Elizabeth Warren, Joe Biden, who they used to call Senator from MBNA. This is a guy who has been in the banking industry. Now, look, does that make you a horrible person? Well, I mean, in my opinion, yeah, not great. But you know, for most people, I don't, you know, that's fine. But Joe Biden is the reason why the bankruptcy law does not allow for kids to get out of student debt or students in bankruptcy. Joe Biden protected the credit card industry in terms of their protections from people who couldn't afford to pay their credit card bills. That's just who Joe Biden is. And if he wants to claim credit for putting Elizabeth Warren on the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, I want to see the documents on that. But lastly, are we going to now analyze Joe Biden? The only reason why Joe Biden can even contemplate running for president a third time after his massive losses is because Barack Obama made him vice president. And I mean, is that going to be the center of his campaign? Is that the way that everybody's going to assess that Joe Biden would just be another aged guy in the Senate at this point? Maybe he would have been challenged by now.
A Neil Kinnock plagiarist.
Exactly.
Top line for him, Neil Kinnock plagiarist.
I mean, honestly,
Absolutely.
You would never hear anybody say that about Joe Biden, even though nothing could be closer to the truth.
And of course, I mean, we don't know what Biden's role. I agree with you. I'd love to see that documentation. We do know that she came to national prominence battling this grotesque bankruptcy bill.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That is actually the real reason that she isn't just a quote unquote beloved Harvard professor,
right.
Because she was a national academic and activist against this atrocious piece of legislation that Joe Biden was the prime architect of.
But now what that tweeter, I can't remember her name, is, again, she is doing, you'll recall, how did Scott Brown run against her? Professor. Okay? She is diminishing what Warren has done in creating the most durable, aggressive, what people consider the best government agency we have, set up in such a way that the Republicans can't unwind it, and like they've tried to unwind just about everything else. And there's a little pat on the head, and they send a woman out to do this because at least they have the sensitivity to realize that if they had a male spokesperson do this, they could never get away with it. But make no mistake about it. It is just as demeaning, misogynist, sexist as it would be if a guy was sent out to do it. It's just a little bit more cynical. It really is, I mean, stunning. I'm surprised that hasn't gotten a lot more attention. A lot more attention. Here is Joe Biden talking about complaining about the bankruptcy bill and how too many people are getting a free ride in this thing. An awful lot of people who are discharging debt who shouldn't, he said during a 2001 Senate hearing. Something is up. And that happened when the economy was booming, absolutely booming. Now, I'm not a real smart fellow, maybe, but there's something wrong. In other words, he's arguing that when the economy goes up, no one should be going into bankruptcy.
No one should be going.
We also know, and maybe he didn't care at that time, but at least 50% of bankruptcies, particularly in 2001, were a function of medical debt, which, and maybe you're not a smart fellow, it doesn't matter what the economy is doing. If you get hit by a bus, it can cost you and sink you into debt. 50% of all personal bankruptcies.
Some people, well, this is a letter from the same article that Warren wrote in 2005. Some people do abuse the bankruptcy system, but the overwhelming majority of people in bankruptcy are in financial distress as a result of job loss, medical expense, divorce, or a combination of those causes.
There is not an institution, a system, a business, an agency, a program that is not abused to some extent. I will cop to this right now. At the hotel we stayed at, you give a card and you get a beach towel. Okay? And I sent my kids up to go get an extra beach towel, and I told them, just tell them Dad has the card. So we had 4 towels so that we could save seats. Corruption happens everywhere. But the idea that that's going to be the excuse. You don't think there's corruption in the credit card business? I mean, give me a break. Right. And so when Joe Biden sends out either his attack dogs or his friends of his attack dogs, or either paid or just simpatico surrogates to go out there and attack Elizabeth Warren, there's a reason why he does it. Because he's got a lot of things to answer for. But one of the biggest is how this guy is married to the banks, married to the credit card companies, and not just in a sort of a neutral, benign way, but in a way that fundamentally targets American citizens, that makes their lives materially worse, that allows for predatory practices. And Elizabeth Warren knows it, and that's why he's got to get out ahead and say, she would be nothing but a beloved law professor if it wasn't for me.
I mean,
at a time when the biggest financial institutions in this country were trying to put the squeeze on millions of hardworking families, there was nobody to stand up for them. I got in that fight because they just didn't have anyone. And Joe Biden was on the side of the credit card companies.
That's it. Joe Biden was on the side of the credit card. She's got the receipts. That's the problem. She's got the receipts. So, I mean, it's an odd choice. You would imagine, like, Joe Biden's not in Elizabeth Warren's lane. So why is the first thing that they're doing when they come out the gate in terms of attacking anybody is attacking Elizabeth Warren? They're attacking Elizabeth Warren because they know that she knows who Joe Biden really is. And so they have to discredit her and make her seem like an uppity, ungracious, beloved. Would you ever call like a male a beloved? Like, it's unbelievable how sort of like gendered that attack was. I mean, I was really taken aback. And I know Joe will just go like, oh, Father, forgive me, I have sinned because I called her beloved. Right?
It's a weird, I mean, I've heard it. There's gendered. It's also, and I hope that, I mean, it would be bizarre if this is what they were doing for obvious reasons, but it's, I have heard that for men who are basically like beloved, like very old. Like a beloved professor who's
retiring. Like a beloved grandma.
Like and beloved grandpa or grandma.
The professor thing also works in terms of like, who are you going to listen to? That egghead over there who's telling you that I'm the one who screwed you on your credit card bills? Or me?